Are the 6 stages of the Level Up Work and Wellness program, and today we are on the 2nd session, so we're on Be Empowered to Grow. And the essence of the program is just that focus on personal agility and wellness. We have 6 sessions bi-weekly. You can register online at itag for one of these sessions or for all sessions. Sometimes, you can't make them all, but you can register for whatever is of interest to you. And we do have recordings available. We'll be sending out afterwards. So if you can't make it, we can send you the recording as well. And Taryn, if you want to just pop the itag registration link in the chat there so people can easily register for the next sessions if they haven't had a chance to do so yet.
Will do.
Great. And then that brings us on to the Be Empowered to Grow session with JJ O'Riordan. So JJ O'Riordan is the founder of the Mindful Leader Academy, and we have the pleasure of having JJ host our first session all around identifying values that are important to you and how you can align your work and your personal life to those values. Such an interesting session. It was a real interactive exercise. So if you want that recording, let us know in the chat or just contact Taryn or I on LinkedIn and we'll send that to you. And then today we're following up to that with the Be Empowered to Grow session. And we're going to focus on, understanding what empowers and disempowers you. And JJ, I think I'll leave it over to you to kind of go through the various stages or items that you're going to enlighten us with today.
Fantastic. Lorna, thank you so much. And thanks, Taryn. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to share this experience of staying empowered and how do we live and lead from a place of empowerment. So I might just start and share my screen. Okay. And yeah, this is the most stressful part, getting this. Okay, so we're good. Right. So where does this come from? We've just finished a program with 150 senior leaders on how to build a culture of empowerment and accountability. And this is a summary of that, but it's also more personal. So we've targeted this to you as an individual. And what is it that empowers us and how do we disempower ourselves? So I'm just wondering if you've ever heard yourself or a colleague of yours say any of the following. You know what? It's faster or easier if I do it myself. You see, the problem with Joe is he's just too nice and he can't say no. Or, thank God I had nothing to do with that project. Or, thank God I had nothing to do with that mess. Or, you know what? If I was able to pick my own team, we'd have a far better organization. Or, you see, that's just not possible in a virtual world. Or, I wish that person would step up more and take more personal accountability. Or I wish that person would be more excited about their jobs. Or, see, the problem with my generation was this, or the problem with your generation is this. Now, the question I have for you is, what's the common thread among all of those statements? And again, I'd love you to just kind of share what strikes you about these statements, maybe in the chat function, if that's okay. Is there any common thread that you notice among those statements? Or anything that strikes you at all about those statements? Blame. Absolutely, Liz. Thank you. 102. Focusing on the problem, not absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. Not taking ownership. Thanks, Emma. They are externalities, things you cannot necessarily control. Negativity. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Not self-reflecting on yourself. Absolutely. These are all what we call victim stories. There isn't one shred of empowerment in any of these statements, and we hear them every day. I use a lot of them myself from time to time. So, and there's no self-reflection, as you'd say. So, we've heard this expression, there's 2 sides to every story. What I've realized is that there's 2 sides to every story I tell myself, right? So there is what I call the victim cycle story, which is an example of what was in the previous slide, which imprisons us in a place of disempowerment and victimhood. And the more I tell myself those stories, the more I disempower myself. So it's like I create a prison for myself. There's also another version of every story that doesn't seem to get the same level of attention, and that's the empowered version, or the empowered story. So in every situation I find myself in, there's always two stories running in my head. The one that I often associate with first, and the loudest one, is the victim story. They can't do that to me. That's not possible. They shouldn't be blaming me. That's the victim story. That will keep me disempowered every day of the week. The question is, how do I dial into the empowered version of the story? And that's what we'll talk about today. How do I shift the inner dialogue from being disempowered, imprisoning, and victim mindset to a place of empowerment and action and possibility? Okay, so which story am I telling myself? Because often the challenge we have here is we're not even aware we're telling ourselves one story, not to mind that there's two stories running, right? So that can be the challenge for us. So let's talk about the victim cycle, or the victim story. And I love this quote: the cruelest prison of all is the prison of the mind. So there's three versions of a victim story that I think we can tell ourselves, and they're captured here. One is what we call a pure victim story, which is, for example, I don't meet all of the requirements for that promotion, so therefore there's no point me applying for the job. Or, there's just not enough variety in my job and I'm bored. Or, you see, I didn't get the coaching I was promised, so that kind of explains why I'm not progressing in my career. Or, you know what, he makes me so angry, and you know what, he also makes other people angry. I'm not the only person here that they annoy, Victim stories. That will imprison me all day, and there isn't one shred of accountability or personal empowerment in that. There are two other versions of the story. So when the victim story, I see myself as the victim. When I start telling myself a persecutory story, I want to make somebody else the victim. For example, they shouldn't have taken that approach. They should have known better. They should have consulted with me. I'm the expert in this area. No wonder it didn't work out. Or I disagree with you. No, that's not what you said. That's not what you committed to me. Persecution story, victim, disempowered, no ownership. The problem is that he just doesn't listen. Your biggest problem is you don't listen. Victim story, no ownership, no possibility of progress. Now, the rescuing victim story is a little bit more subtle. This is where I'm interacting with a colleague and I really have a belief that they are a victim in their own lives, that somehow they can't do their job, so I need to step in and rescue. It's quite a subtle form of a victim story. And it can be something along the lines, you know what, they're so busy, I won't even ask them to take on the extra responsibility. Or, you know what, I think it's faster if I do it myself. Or, I couldn't say that to them, to destroy them. If I told them that, it would destroy them. There's an overprotective nature, but it's coming from a belief that the other person is not creative, resourceful, or whole. This needs to be right. So I have the expertise. So I really need to do this one myself. I'm robbing my team members of the opportunity of growing into higher levels of empowerment. Okay, so they're the victim stories we tell ourselves, not one shred of accountability, not one shred of empowerment. So I want to introduce you to this character, and he's called a bystander. And he or she will be the person that says, you're right, I wouldn't put up with that either. You shouldn't take that from him. You shouldn't take that from her, right? You were promised coaching, you didn't get it. This person fuels drama in our lives, and we call him the bystander. Okay, so can I just check, can you resonate with victim stories before I move on and talk about how we shift out of victim to empowerment? Again, if you would use the chat, I'd love to know if these victim stories, whether it's victim, persecutor, or rescue, that you can relate to them. Oh yeah, super. Thanks, Lorna. Yeah, definitely. Super. Totally. Thanks, Valerie. And yes, all three. Brilliant. Okay. So we can really resonate with when we are telling ourselves victim stories, right? So what's the alternative? How do I move out of victim to become back to be the creator of my own life and the creator of my own future? So instead of being a victim, I need to embrace vulnerability, which is also known as courage. Now, again, if I could just do a quick check. When you hear the word vulnerability, what words do you associate with it? Again, just when somebody mentions the word vulnerability, what words do you associate with the word vulnerable? Weak. Thanks, Catherine. Weakness. Thanks, Dermot. Yeah, Lillian, thank you. Showing your weakness. Absolutely. I've asked this question all over the world in different cultures. and the same word comes up first time, weakness. Can I really encourage you to read the research of Brené Brown, or maybe her book called Daring to Lead, where she talks about vulnerability is not weakness. It's our most accurate measure of our courage. So courage is the first step out of victim, back into empowerment. I've got to be willing to go outside my comfort zone, which is another definition of vulnerability. But Brené Brown has a TED talk on this that I'd really encourage you to research her work, because she really changed my view. And I now see vulnerability as an indication of my courage. Instead of the courage to, now this is really important. If I want to move out of victim, I've got to have the courage to see, how did I contribute to the current situation? Now, that doesn't mean to blame myself. Now, we could spend an entire 2 hours on this, but the first step out of the victim mindset or the victim cycle is to ask myself the question, what could I have done differently to avoid this current situation? What facts did I choose to ignore that have resulted in this current situation? Because the minute I have the courage to see my contribution, the minute I'll see a way forward out of the current situation. Now, instead of rescuing somebody, I need to apply appropriate support, right? This really comes down to, if I want to stop seeing others as victim, which is going to take me back into the victim cycle, I need to have the courage to believe in other people's potential. Again, this leads to the entire world of coaching. And I know Lorna and Karen will be talking later on about coaching and mentoring. The Bible for me on coaching is coaching for performance. And so it's about the courage to believe in other people's untapped potential. That will take me out of victim and bring me back into empowerment. Instead of persecuting people, it's about the skill of respectful challenge. Right. So again, I don't believe there's any justification for me to judge somebody else. And there are times I will need to respectfully challenge. So this is the empowerment cycle as opposed to the victim cycle. Okay. Now, often to move from victim to empowerment, what it requires of me is the courage to speak my truth. That's often the secret. But again, that takes vulnerability and that takes courage. Okay. So these are the core competencies that we develop, for example, when we work with leaders, so that they're always leading and living from a place of empowerment, right? Now, the book I'd recommend on the courage to speak is Crucial Conversations. I have no association with them, but I'm a fan of their work, right? Next point I'd like to make is there are two sides to every story, but one is an awful lot more attractive than the other. And I love this quote: until the lion learns to write, every story will always glorify the hunter. Now, what do I mean by that? In every situation, in every aspect of our life, there are two stories I can tell myself. One is the imprisoned victim story, and one is the empowered story. Now, I have personally spent months of my life convincing myself of my victim story. They shouldn't have done that to me. They should have known better. I got stuck in my own life for months, until I transitioned to the empowered version of the story. And the minute we shift to the empowered version of the story, that is always there, but we often spend too much time trying to convince other people of our victim stories. The minute I move from victim to empowerment, I automatically begin to see solutions and the way forward. So my personal definition of personal empowerment is it's a choice I need to make to rise above my current circumstances and to consciously transition from the victim story that I'm wed to the empowered story that I know is going to create the results that I want, right? It is so easy to say, but in all of my experience of having researched this now for a while, it is the core skill that I need to develop, is to hear the victim story and to have techniques and approaches to transition to the empowerment story as quick as possible. Okay, so how do we do that? There are 4 steps to transition away from a victim story to come back into my place of personal power. The first thing is I've got to be willing to see all of the reality, not just the reality the victim story is telling me, but also the accountable version, my part in the current reality. That's crucial, and that's often the hardest part for us. And again, it's not to blame ourselves, but to say, how did I contribute to this current situation? That is the empowered question. Once I'm willing to ask myself that question and own the solution, I now see my contribution in the current situation. And the minute I can see my contribution, I now see options on the way forward. So now I can go into solve it. And the question that I encourage leaders to ask is, what else can I do to rise above my current circumstances to achieve the results I want? But even there, do you see the level of empowerment of that question? And once we move beyond finding a solution, we now need to implement it. So yes, I can see my contribution. Yes, I can own it. Yes, I can solve it. But unless I take the final step to actually implement that solution, I haven't taken total ownership or empowerment in this particular context. And the mantra I take when I get to the do it stage is whatever it takes, JJ, to deliver on this result. Obviously, it's ethically, morally, legally, and stuff like that. So this comes from a book called The Oz Principle. I'd be a huge fan of the book. But again, for me, the challenge is, if I want to come back into a place of empowerment, the biggest challenge for me is, am I willing to see my contribution, and am I willing to own it? Because that is the step out of victim back into empowerment. Okay, so I want to finish with two things. Just want to be conscious of time. I'd like to share with you the secret to living a personal, empowered, and joyful life, right? Based on my own lived experience as a therapist, as a coach, and as somebody who's worked with leaders for many years, is how quickly can I transform my victim stories in my own head into empowerment stories? Because the longer I stay in the victim story, the more of my life I'm wasting and I'm losing out on. But the minute I can switch to empowerment, automatically I'll come back into my power and I'll see a way forward. So we get out of the blame game that you mentioned at the start. So the final thing then is, so that's at a personal level. So personally, my responsibility is to become aware of the victim story, which can either be blaming myself, persecuting somebody else, or seeing somebody else as a victim. That's what causes victim stories in our lives. How quickly can I see that, and how quickly can I transition to the empowered version of that is the secret. If you want to create a culture of empowerment, then there's two things I would suggest. One, focus on psychological safety, because the higher the safety, the easier it is for people to come into their power. And the second thing is to be really clear what we mean by accountability. And this comes from the work of Amy Edmondson. Okay, so if there's no accountability in a company and there's no psychological safety, that's the apathy zone. We'll move on. It's an awful place to be. If we focus on just creating a psychologically safe work environment, everybody will love coming to work until the business closes down. If we only focus on accountability and we're holding everybody accountable for results, but we're not focusing on psychological safety, we run the risk of creating an anxiety zone. In an anxiety zone, people tend to blame more and protect themselves more, so less likely to take ownership. So what we want to do in all cultures is to create both. I think that we constantly need to be focusing on both creating personal accountability, which is what we discussed earlier, but also collective psychological safety. And again, if you're interested in reading a bit more about that, I would recommend Amy Edmondson's book on the Fearless Organization and the Oz Principle. And again, I'm a huge fan of the work of Patrick Lencioni. If you want to look at this through the eyes of your team, I'd really recommend the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team survey. So that's all I had. I know it's quite quick. I would love to take questions if you have any questions. But in summary, it's the secrets are become aware of, am I telling myself a victim story or an empowerment story? And if I'm telling myself a victim story, how quickly can I translate that into an empowerment story? Because that's where I begin to see choice and the way forward. And it gets away from all the blame game, blaming self or blaming others. So that's what I'm not sure where I am in time. I hope I'm close enough to the 15-minute mark.
Yeah, that's great, JJ. No, you're on the mark there. Thank you so much.
Fantastic.
So yeah, if people have questions over the next 15 minutes or so, you can pop them in the chat, and we're going to have some time at the end where we share some insights and we can go through any of the questions you may have. I see there's one coming in there, so I'll leave that with you for the moment, JJ, and when we come back to that moment, maybe you could share some examples.
I will, of course. Thanks, Lorna. Thanks
for
the question.
And in the meantime, then, Taryn and I are just going to spend some time talking about the growth aspect. So I guess when it came to those steps, JJ, that you mentioned, being able to see it, own it, solve it, and do it, we're going to look at ways as to how you could solve it and do it. So the actions you can take to empower yourself and to grow both personally and professionally. And these are very much our own experiences. So we've got together, we've worked in tech for almost 10 years now, and we just wanted to share what's worked for us, just in case it gives you any ideas. So I'll just reshare here and you can let me know if that comes through okay. Okay, is that all right? Can you see that?
Not quite yet.
Acting to share, I think it says, Lorna.
Okay, so it's not coming through yet?
I've just got a black screen.
Okay, let me just reshare. We'll do it again. Is that coming through this time?
No.
So just a black screen, is it?
Saying that you have started, Lorna Smith has started screen sharing. I wonder, have you two screens? Is it?
Try again. I see you just made the host, so it might be that.
Oh, okay, we'll go third time lucky. Third time's a charm. So let me do that one more time. Maybe it was permissions based. Is that coming up?
No.
Okay. Taryn, would you mind switching over? I can start talking, but I know you have the slide deck there, so if you could pick it up from this slide.
Yep.
And I'll give you a moment to get organized. But essentially what's on the slide, or what will be on the slide in a moment, is just some of the growth sources that we wanted to share with you. So the first area is mentoring, coaching, and networking. And I'll just share a little bit, I guess, about my experiences with those and what I've done. So from the mentoring perspective, and once Taryn is sharing, I'll actually ask Taryn to give her insights about the differences of mentoring and coaching. But for me, you know, there are a lot of mentoring programs out there to help you, whether that's personally or professionally, and sometimes within your companies there's mentoring programs, or there's third-party organizations like itag who run mentoring programs. I know they ran that cybersecurity program that was very successful. And even in my last company, we didn't have a mentoring program per se, but I was keen to get some help. So if you have a goal in mind, you don't have to have a goal, but I actually had a specific goal. I was working in SmartBear and I really wanted to speak at a conference, but I had no confidence in doing that. I didn't know how to apply. I had imposter syndrome. I didn't feel that I would be worthy of being on stage. But regardless, I signed up for a speaking mentoring program, and I was assigned a person who gave me advice on how to apply for conferences, where to start, the kind of things they look for. And really, she just kind of gave me confidence and believed in me. And if I had questions, I could ask her. And what I did was looked online then for conferences and applied for several. And then I actually, within a couple of months, got accepted to speak in Los Angeles at one of the biggest software testing conferences in the US called Star West. And, you know, I did it, I spoke, I got really good feedback, and I really put that down to the mentoring that I was given by my mentor. So I do highly recommend just looking out there. If you have any goals in mind, like I just searched online for speaking, mentoring, found this one, got assigned a person, and it resulted in me being an international speaker. So that was my experience with mentoring. And then I know with coaching, Taryn, you've had some experience with coaching that you wanted to share.
Yeah, can I check? Can you see my screen now? Is it up?
Yes, coming
Okay,
through
great.
for me. Thanks so much for jumping in there.
Yeah, no worries. So yeah, so it's kind of natural when you're in the Scrum Master field to learn a bit more about mentoring, coaching, facilitating the difference between them, and it's also where you progress. A lot of Scrum Masters will go on to be agile coaches, and the difference with a mentor and a coach. So a mentor is somebody who's usually has the knowledge or the experience that you want to learn from. So they would know a specific topic, or say it's leadership. You can go to a leader and go, would you mentor me into leadership, or can you mentor me into this software architect role, or whatever, you know, anything like that. But where a coach doesn't necessarily need to know what you want the coach believes that you have the answers inside you, and they're going to help you delve inside yourself and figure out what you have inside you and where you want to go with from that. So it's not necessarily learning specific topics or things like that. That's coaching is more for the growth aspect. So I have done a lot of training then from the Agile side to learn more about coaching, something I definitely want to progress with more in my career. Yeah, so that's my coaching experience.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah, I know we were going to talk about, you can mention it, Lorna, that we were also on itag's coaching program.
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, getting a mentor or a coach is great, but also volunteering as a mentor or a coach can make or help you grow a lot as well and just give your confidence. So both Taryn and I are coaches on the itag Coaching for Success program. And you learn a lot about yourself, but also just learning from the other person and the type of challenges they're facing and where they need support with. So, you know, both sides of it, whether you're being a mentor or looking to be mentored, you get a lot of experience and a lot of growth through that. Okay, and then just onto the networking piece as well. So I'm sure you all know I'm a big fan of the networking. I hopefully met a lot of you over the years. But for me, like the itag Digital Women's Forum and all the various events we have ran, both in person and virtually, they've really helped me grow as a person and grow my career here in Galway. And I just feel like I have a network of people now that if I was stuck or needed help or wanted to work with somebody on something or get advice on a challenge, I have a really great network of tech professionals that I can lean on or learn from and support, hopefully. So networking for me has been really, really helpful, and just having my community, and community is a big important piece for me coming from a small village. So I think networking is really great, and I've got a lot from it over the years.
Yeah, and we also have the Atlantic events. Hopefully they'll be live again in person someday soon. So those are great for networking. The events like that, like local technology kind of forums or groups, are great for networking.
Yeah, so they were just the first group of growth sources that we wanted to just share. And again, this is just our experience. It's not an exhaustive list. But if you're struggling to understand or to know, okay, where will I start, or what kind of growth can I look at, or where can I grow from, these are just some of our experiences. So then the next area there is peers. And Taryn, if you can just hit next on that when you have a moment, please. And this is all about learning from your peers. So I know in my role, I'm what they call a solutions engineer. And this is typically a pre-sales role, and we're called all kinds of things. It could be solutions engineers, solution consultants. But what we have is a global community of pre-sales engineers that you can join in the community, and you have access to thousands of people who work in similar roles to yourself across all organization or industry types, big and small, globally. And for me, I've learned a lot from there. There's this huge Slack group and different channels. So if you're looking for job opportunities in pre-sales, there's a place you can look for those. If you want to connect with pre-sales professionals in Ireland specifically, there's a group for those. If you're facing a specific challenge, or you want to understand how to measure the success of a solutions engineer, like what kind of metrics you look at, there's channels dedicated to that. So for me, that's a massive growth source. Like if I'm going to become a solutions engineer manager of a team, then this is really a great resource for me to understand the things I need to consider, and also to voice challenges and areas where I feel I need some support and growth in. So for me, my peers have been a massive help, and not just the pre-sales collective community, but also just the people I work with every day. And you can obviously learn a lot from them as well. And Taryn, I know you have some as well or some groups of people that have been helping your growth.
Yeah, there's so many communities out there, especially with the Meetup application has become great for networking and learning from your peers. I do a lot of agile ones as well, and there's also a lot of summits. I know in the what I'm interested in, like there's an Agile Hero Summit I go to every quarter. That's my minimum commit to my personal growth. But yeah, you'll find some amazing things out there to learn from others that have been there and done what you're looking to do next.
Yeah, great. So yeah, again, just to recap, this is all in the solve it and do it stage of JJ's steps. So thanks for sharing that, Taryn. And then finally, the other area that we kind of honed in on was the outside of work growth sources. And we've just picked a few again, for example, with education, through the various education that you're I guess, working with or that you're completing, you're always going to have the opportunity to work with and learn from like-minded people who, again, are facing similar challenges and with similar growth goals. And you can work together, leveraging each other's strengths and experiences to help progress your own skills and experiences. And then with family and friends, I know personally, I'm very lucky to have a family who, a lot of which work in my domain. So they all have tech jobs, and I am close enough with to be able to ask for advice on difficult situations or challenges I'm experiencing. So I find family and friends are another growth source for me. I can just kind of lean on them a bit and say, what would you do in this situation? Have you ever come across this, etc. So again, that's another growth source that I thought was quite relevant.
Yeah, and if you don't have family or friends in the same industry, you know, there's always transferable skills between any industry, even just learning how to work with people, the soft skills, you know, dealing with conflict and stuff like that, that happens across every industry. And then the last one, counseling. So you can call it counseling, you can call it therapy, whatever it is. This for me is something that I've been doing for years. I don't do it as in I'm a traumatized person. I suppose at some stage everyone's got a trauma, but it's more, this is my, if anyone knows Agile, this is where I do my retrospectives. I speak to a counselor every 2 or 3 weeks to retrospect. For me, the part that you said, JJ, about owning it, this is the part that I reflect on. Okay, so this has happened. What parts of it do I own and take accountability for? Can I own the good things and the bad things that I think that I've done? So that's how I do it. And then what can I do next time? So it's the same way as an Agile. See what you've done in the last few weeks, what's working, keep doing that. If it doesn't, figure out what you're going to do to do things differently. So that's the way that I use that. And I find that extremely helpful for my personal growth, because I don't want to be someone that's stuck in any of those modes that you show, JJ. I always want to progress and grow. So that's important to me.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon, for sharing.
Cool. I've got an old deck here, but sorry, I'm sharing, but we're going to go 10 minutes for the breakouts. Sorry.
Wonderful. Yeah. So we're just going to do the breakout sessions now, and you can see there what we're going to work through. And I seem to have lost the ability to create breakout rooms. So I'm not sure if Joe or Taryn, if you have that power currently. And what we're going to do is break you into groups of 2s and 3s, and you'll have a moment to just introduce each other, let each other know what role you're working in, what company you're working with. And then if you can think of any, I guess, items or things that you feel empower you or disempower you, if you feel comfortable, you can share them with each other, just to kind of help really think about it and see, okay, what does disempower me or what empowers me? And then based on some of the growth sources we shared or growth sources that you're aware of that we didn't talk about, we'd like you to identify, you know, at least one of those that you're actually going to look towards doing. So basically an action point. And again, we'd encourage you to share these, because what you might think is a good growth source might be really good for somebody else. And maybe Taryn and I haven't heard of it either. So we can all learn from each other here. It's just a nice space for us all to collaborate. And once we do the breakout, then we'll come back together as a group. And if people would like to share any of their growth sources that they've chosen or any insights, they can do so in the chat. And we'll also give JJ a moment to look at some of those questions that have come through as well. And then we'll finish up the session. So we're just going to put you into the breakout rooms. Again, it'll be a quick 10 minutes, say hello to each other, connect on LinkedIn, do all that fun stuff that I love to do, and we'll come back then together as a group. Somebody new or speak questions that came through. So JJ, I'll hand it over to you for the next moment.
Super, thanks, Lorna. So one of the questions that came in is, does the victim story always come before the empowered story? And my experience is often that is the case, because the victim story serves a purpose. It's there to keep us safe. It's there to protect us. So if I can blame you, I don't need to blame myself. So there's a protective element to the victim story, and that's the purpose it serves. But it is about survival. It's not about effectiveness. So that's where it doesn't serve us as leaders. So that's the first thing. And there was a great question then as well about, so how do you work with someone? Do you have any advice for helping those who might be telling themselves victim stories? So I have a colleague and they're constantly, glass half empty, glass broken, this is, and all. So how do you work with somebody who's in a protective place, and the way they show they're protective is they're telling themselves victim stories? The first thing I believe is the first thing that I need to do is I need to make sure the person feels heard and that their story feels heard by me. So it's the empathic listening. And once they feel heard, then they'll engage with the conversation. At some stage, then I ask a question that transforms from victim to empowered. For example, one question that often is asked is, if there was one thing that you could do today that would move you closer to what you want, what might that be? Right? But that you cannot, I don't believe that question is helpful until the person feels I've heard their story. The least helpful thing I can do to somebody who's telling me a victim story is to highlight that they're telling me a victim story, because now I'm persecuting them and I'm now in drama with them, right? So my first responsibility is to make sure they feel heard. And then one other question as well was around, can I give an example of victim stories? So anytime I'm blaming myself or anytime I'm blaming somebody else, I'm telling myself a victim story. Let me give you an example. I should have known better. It's a victim story. They should have paid more attention to the work they're doing. Victim story. I don't have the resources. Victim story. So anytime I'm telling myself a disempowered story that's either disempowering me or attempting to disempower somebody else, that's a victim story in my life. Just wanted to share those few examples. Yeah. Victim stories keep me imprisoned and keep me stuck. Empowered stories help me to create my own reality and create the world I want to live in and the results I need to generate. So I just want to pick up on those. So thank you so much for the questions. I just want to pick up on those couple.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, JJ. And just, I guess, on the point of the victim story, I guess once you have the awareness that you are telling a victim story, it's then going to those guidelines that JJ shared about being able to see it. That's the first step. So you realizing, okay, this is actually a victim story, and then owning it, solving it, and doing it. And we will share these slides with you after today's session. So you'll be able to reference those kind of actionable steps, and also some of those books that JJ recommended to help you really get your head around it and implement it in your own life. Okay, so just to finish up then, first and foremost, thank you so much, JJ. It's been such a pleasure having you for our first 2 sessions of the Level Up Work and Wellness program. I personally have learned a huge amount and really looking forward to working with you in the future. And it's just great to have you on board with the program. So thank you for that.
Absolutely, my pleasure, Lauren. I've really enjoyed working with yourself and Taryn and Dee. And thank you for the opportunity to share my understanding of both of the topics we've covered.
Thank you. You're very welcome. And then the second thank you is to everybody who's on the call. So yeah, we had a really good turnout again today. Really great to see everybody joining from all the different organizations in Galway. It's always inspiring to see. And for those of you who are going to be on the next session, it is on the 20th of October and it's going to be What Rises to the Top. So we will be going into our 3rd session. And you can register for these sessions, like I mentioned, on the itag website. I will just paste it in the chat here for those of you who want to do that right away.
Just did that, Snap.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, great. We're aligned. And then just maybe on the next slide there, Taryn, if we could just look at what we're going to cover for the What Rises to the Top session. So Taryn and I are going to host this, and with Taryn's experience of goal setting and our own personal and professional experiences, we're going to walk through understanding the basics of goals, how to create great goals, and then understanding whether you're working on the right goals, goals that align to your values. We'll then look at how you can review your progress with those goals, and then talk about what kind of support you have in place to stay on track. And we're going to introduce the buddy system and give you the opportunity to actually meet buddies or accountability buddies within this program. So that's going to be another hands-on session. We will make it as interactive as possible. We will have the opportunity for networking in our breakout sessions as well as an activity. So yeah, we're really looking forward to delivering that, and that's on October 20th, same time, 1 o'clock to 1:45 or to 2 on Wednesday the 20th. And then finally, just a shout out on the socials. So if you enjoyed today's session or you want to share any thoughts or any insights, you can do so. We have the itag Twitter handles there, itag tech or itag_Digital Women's Forum, Digital WF. And you can use the hashtag level up, or if you're on LinkedIn, you can follow Taryn, myself, or JJ, and you can see JJ's contact details there as well if you did want to work with JJ within your own organizations. His email and is available there, and as well as his LinkedIn. and also connect with us if you're not a connection of Taryn and I yet. Please feel free to join with us on LinkedIn, and you'll get to see us post about other events like this coming up over the next few months. So Taryn, I think that covers off today's session, and thank you so much for being a fabulous co-host as always, and for jumping in with the technical difficulties. Really, really appreciate it. Was there anything else, Taryn?
No, thanks so much, JJ, for the last 2 sessions. It's been really great, and we look forward to seeing you in our next session. And JJ, please join if you're free.
Absolutely, Taryn. Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Okay, we'll
Thanks
see
for
you
your
soon.
time, everyone. Take
Thanks,
care.
Lillian. Bye.
Bye.
See you in the next
Bye.
session. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Hey,
Bye-bye
thanks
now.
everyone.